Okay, so I'm just going to start over. I didn't say much anyway before. Make sure you complain in the chat if anything's broken. All right. And then hopefully I'll check it. All right, so we're starting Chapter 3. In Chapter 2, we learned the HTML language for building the structure of a web page. We learned the basics. The 3 parts, remember, tags, elements, and attributes. As long as you can remember that, everything's built with those 3 things in HTML. Actually kind of chilly in here. I'm loving this weather. I don't know what it's like down there. I'm in Urbana right now. It's pretty chilly up here, but it's nice. It's not burning up all the time. Okay. It's good for the plants too. Oops. All right. So HTML in Chapter 2. You know the basics. We're ready to learn another language. This one's even simpler than HTML, and it works together with it to change the properties of those elements. So you may notice the web pages you were building in Chapter 2 were on a white background with black text. That's arguably the easiest way to read things on a screen. Okay, and we're all about designing things to be easy, accessible, efficient. And then it helps if it looks good, but we don't have that yet. So that's what we're going to learn now with CSS. All right. Right, it does warm up later in the day. Man, I mowed the yard yesterday and it was so humid. Let's look at the resources I posted for Chapter 3 here. So you can lean on these resources if you need extra information, because I know it's a little bit exhausting to learn HTML and then immediately learn CSS. Okay. So I have some demos set up. If you need some extra working examples of these things, you can check out my demos. So I think I commented them a little bit, but it's just something I built probably live in another class and I threw it up there. You can check that out. And then if you are looking for more videos, you can check these links out. I found some resources online. Khan Academy is always a good thing, and I know it feels weird for me teaching this class to just post videos from another class, but I believe this is free and just illustrates the power of the internet. Part of my job is just grabbing these resources and shoving them in a package so that you don't have to do that. And so I vetted these resources, and I know they're good for you. All right, let's talk about this here, the CSS Validator. This is going to be your best friend. It'll save you a lot of time. Let's see make sure you guys can see me here. Okay. Actually make this smaller. Yeah. There we go. CSS Validator. So let's load that up. And actually, it might be better if I illustrate this. There's also an HTML validator, and apparently I never pointed this out, so sorry. This would have helped a lot, but moving forward, it'll help a lot. So what this does is you can input HTML code and it will detect the errors for you. Okay. So if we go to pull up some code. So So I'll pull up one of those demos. Oh, it turned blue all of a sudden. That was weird. Okay. So let's check out this CSS Rules demo. So here's a little preview of what we're going to be doing in Chapter 3. This chapter is about learning the basics of what CSS is and what the parts are. Okay. Then there were 3 parts in HTML. There are 3 parts in CSS. Okay. So here's some HTML code, and there's some CSS in there, but I'm just going to copy this to show you how this tool works. All right, and then you go into here, into the HTML validator, and you can put in an address. You can upload a file. I prefer to use the direct input. It's just so it's quicker and you don't have to save and download things. All right. Then you just have to check the code. And then at the bottom, it will tell you warnings are in yellow. So these aren't going to break the page, but they'll make it better. And then errors are going to be in red. So let's just go down through here. And we'll just start deleting random things. Okay, let's put that there. Get rid of that. Okay, bunch of stuff. So we can get some errors. Okay, it's saying chasset is not a attribute that you can use on meta. It's just not going to do anything is what it's saying. Okay. So error 2 here, it's telling me this. I can look at this and say, oh, that's supposed to be char set. So I can go to line 4 and change that. Open my code. And you want to fix these errors one at a time, because fixing one error might get rid of later errors. Okay, so whoops, there's no 1 on here. You get the idea. So instead of opening the code and you know, line by line looking at it, okay, this is the perfect task for a computer to do. I mean, it already does it when it interprets HTML to the browser. So they just wrote this validator as a different type of interpreter that looks for errors. Okay, so one of the biggest problems people have when they start this is typos. And so this will really help you identify those. Okay, what does this look like? All right, so we're going to be adding some color, being able to control different colors and things. All right, so now the CSS validator works about the same way, but you can only put CSS code in there. And it'll show you typos and things you might have forgot. I recommend using that. If something doesn't work, I recommend, or you're done, throw it in the validator and just double check. It'll save you so much time. Okay, Chapter 3. So you can take a look at those resources if you want. So CSS. All right. So in HTML, we learned the 3 parts and the basic structure of elements on a page, and all the syntax, which is just basically the proper organization of the characters that the computer can recognize. All right, so here are the 3 parts. We have selector, property, value. Okay, you can just call them selector, property, value. You don't have to call it declaration, property, yada, yada. So here, all right, you might recognize this. body. Does anyone remember where that's from? All right. Pause it for a second if you want to think about it. Otherwise, we'll move on here. So this is referring to the body element in the web page. Okay, so selectors, at this point, so we know, I want you to know, selectors can be tag names. Okay, so here we're selecting the body, and then we put curly brace, and then you start listing your property value pairs. Okay, so here the color property refers to the text color, and that throws people off. They called it color and not text color. Okay, and here we're putting in blue, so we're changing all the text in the body to blue. All right, let's check that out real quick so you can see how to use this. So when you create a new HTML replit project, remember I mentioned it creates these two files. Well, we're not ready to use JavaScript yet, so you can either leave that or delete it. It's up to you. But now we're ready to move on to this file. So this is one place we can put CSS. This is called external CSS because it's a separate file. It's probably the most often used type of CSS because it has the most far-reaching effects. All right. Some people build external style sheets as templates, and you can apply that to any web page if you've used, elements to build that. But we're building our own here so we can learn the language. So, big thing, you do not put HTML elements or tags inside of CSS because that will just break it. And one of the downsides to CSS is if you make an error early on in the code, it usually just breaks everything. So if you notice your CSS isn't doing anything, it's because there's probably an error. And if there's an error, you could either line by line look through it or go use that CSS validator. Okay, so let's just copy the text into here. Color blue. Okay. Now you'll notice on the slides, they put a bunch of spaces in here. That's to help you see what's going on. Okay, you can put those in there if you want to make it easier to see. But we have a selector, property, and value. Okay, if we run it, what's going to happen? Nothing, because there's no elements to affect. Okay, so let's add some elements. And do you remember, we're going to add elements that are going to show up in the web page. So do you guys remember what section that will go in? Does it go in the head section or the body section or somewhere else? I'm going to get rid of this out of the body because we're not using JavaScript here. So remember, if we want the elements to show up on the page, we want to put them in the body. It'll work if you put it other places, but then it'll be disorganized and harder to troubleshoot. So put it in here, and let's just use some elements from the previous chapter. We'll be learning a lot more elements in later chapters. After chapter 3, if you make it through chapter 3 and you understand HTML and CSS, the rest of the course is very simple because all you're learning is more HTML elements and more CSS properties and how those work together to do things like, make your page more accessible, make it printable, optimize it for mobile, all kinds of stuff. Okay, 2 elements is enough to show you that it turns blue, I think. Okay, so we got blue text. If we want a different color, we can type that. Okay. Chartreuse. So it was a weird color. So basics. So that's how you use that's going to be the most common way you use CSS. All right, is in that separate file. Now in the exercises, it is going to ask you to use all. There are 3 types of CSS, and it's going to ask you to demonstrate the use of all of them. All right. So here they're introducing a new property. All right, and they're showing you with a single selector, you can affect multiple properties as long as you follow the correct syntax. And also notice the way they have this formatted. Okay, you want your property value pairs to be on separate lines, so it's a lot easier to read. So I can see at the top, changing the text color to blue, okay, and then on the next line here, we're changing the background color to yellow. So let's try that. Feel free to copy and paste the code out of here. One downside is if you copy it out of Canvas PowerPoint, it'll put it all on one line because of the limitations of the way it converts the PowerPoint into HTML. But if you copy it out of the actual PowerPoint file, it'll retain the white space. So you don't want to use, you would never have 2 CSS rules in here that were just body, okay? So a combination of the selector, property, and value. The combination of those 3 is called a CSS rule. So we're changing this CSS rule to include background color. I think I just don't have enough space. I'm going to close files. Actually, I'll need files. So I'll just minimize it a bit. Okay. And we don't need this much space over here. Okay, so you can see I want this to be under the property here, the other property, so I can see those. And Replit is a programming text editor here, so it has the color coding. So your selectors are going to be dark blue, properties light blue, values orange. So if I change or if I mess up the syntax, so one thing about using multiple properties is you have to separate those lines with a semicolon. Okay, so if I have one property, it's fine. I recommend always including the semicolon, even if you're using only one property, because you may add more later. Okay. Let's say I don't put the semicolon. Look what happens. The color changes. Why did it change to orange? What was orange again? That's the values. So why are these orange? These aren't values. Well, I've made a syntax error, which means I'm trying to tell the computer to use the color blue background color yellow. And then this colon is just floating there, causing problems. Okay, so look, we don't have blue, we don't have yellow. Anyway, you can easily identify that error by looking at the color of the code, is what I'm saying. So, blue and yellow, I think those are complementary colors. Anyway, using primary colors on your web page is a big no-no for design. For this class, it's fine. We're just testing and learning. So this is where we start. Primary colors are just way too much, too bright, and too jarring for a web page. Harder to read. All right, so double checking the chat here. We got 3 people. That's pretty good for an optional live stream. What else? So let's take a look down here at this rule. Okay, I'm going to copy it over. And we'll go here. Copy it in. All right. It's the same, but the code's different. So let's take a look here at what's going on. Okay, color is this right here. So we have £, and then we have some numbers and letters. Okay, what does this mean? Okay. In Replit, I believe, yeah, if you select one of these, no, this is actually just a number. The whole thing's a number. I know it has F's in it, but we'll talk about that in a second. You may already know why. This number up here is actually represents 3 different values. The first 2 is the amount of red color you want in your mixture. Second 2 numbers are how much green. Last 2 numbers are how much blue. And it's from 0 to 255. So if there's 0 red and green and 255 blue, it's going to look like this. Just solid, straight, pure blue. All right. Let's adjust this a bit and see how the numbers change. Okay, let's go to this kind of tealish, light teal. All right. Very hard to read on yellow. Okay, so pay attention to that when you're choosing colors on your own. Okay. And let's do here. So let's see how this translates into the color values. I like to just explain this. There's so many tools, like you notice on Replit here, you can adjust the color simply by selecting a new color, and look at the values change at the top. Okay. So you could theoretically, you know, just mix colors at random, but this is just a way to represent way more colors than by name. Okay, so if you have 255, I think it's, how do you calculate that? How many combinations? You have 3 values, 0 to 255. Let's look that up. 3 values, 0 to 255. I think you just multiply, but you might have to do I can't remember what that's called. It's like a possible combination calculator. I just can't remember the formula off the top of my head. Combinations and permutations. Okay, so if you have no idea what that is, let's say you are going to a restaurant. Let's just use McDonald's. Everyone knows McDonald's, and you want to get a cheeseburger. Okay. How many different toppings can you put on a cheeseburger? All right. You can have every potential topping. So that would be one type of cheeseburger you could get. Okay. That would be one permutation of the McDonald's cheeseburger. So we have plain with ketchup, plain with mustard. We also have plain with ketchup and mustard. Those would be all permutations. So in this case, we're thinking, what are all the permutations of these colors? If we have 250, if each one could be a different value, how many do we have? So, these are all the explanations of how to get this to calculate your permutations. So, we have 256 types to choose from. Why did I put 256? I'm going to continue on, and you think about why I put 256 if the value can only go to 255. Okay, and then we need 3 values. Order's not important, I don't think. And is repetition allowed? I think that is. Can we have the same values in different spots? But it explains it down here. Pattern rule. What are we looking for? Repetition. No, this is for the more complicated stuff. I think we can repeat the same values is what that's saying. So, Maybe. Well, let's see how different it is. Yeah, there's less combination. So I think it's this. Yeah, it's... Oh, we got numbers. 3. No. Can you repeat a number? Yes. Okay, so we have this many combinations, I believe. Of color. So the reason I'm bringing this up is it's something you're never going to have to do here, but it's just something good to know if you ever need to calculate out how many different combinations of things there are. This also, again, I'm going to harp on this all the time. This shows you the power of the internet. Okay, I forgot the formula. Okay, I don't even know if I learned it in any of my math classes. All right, but I know how to find the calculator. All right, and then I just input and get my answer. And it even shows you the formula if you want to do it by hand. Okay, but unless you're a mathematician and you're doing this, you know, every day, you don't need to memorize it. All right. All right. So there's my off topic going. I actually have one more thing to talk about with this. So why are there F's in there, and why are there... We don't need this anymore. Here we have 7 to ECD. What the heck does that mean? How does 7.2 translate into 170? How does that translate into 114? And those other values, EC is this, and D, whatever this was. How does that work? So, Alex, you're exactly right. And I'm glad you said something because I would have forgot to go back and answer that. So if we can use the value 0 to 255, if we say there's 255, it's because we're thinking, okay, 1 to 255. But if you do 256 values, that includes 0. In computers, 0 is a very useful number. Unfortunately, it takes a while for you to get used to including 0 in all of your counts of things. It's more important in programming when you're like actually using logic. In HTML and CSS, there's not really, as far as I'm aware, there's not really a lot of that logic and gating and things like that. Okay, I know some or all of you are in the logic class. Some of you might be in the Python class. That's the kind of area where I'll talk about how 0's even more important. Okay, so what is this number? Why does it have letters in it? So, again, this one I do know the formula for, but why would I take the time? Okay. Excel and basically any spreadsheet software that allows you to use formulas, extremely useful for all kinds of tasks. So I highly recommend you know how to use this. We do offer an advanced Excel course at Lakeland. Highly recommend that if you're interested in an elective for the programming degree or the web degree even. Okay, so the normal numbering system that we use is called decimal, okay, which means deci is 10, hexadeci is 16, okay? Don't you just love learning all these facts? So decimal is a base 10, which means there are 10 characters that represent numbers in it, and hexadecimal is base 16. So if I go, these are all the numbers inside of base 10. Hopefully 2 is enough to use the autofill. Yes. All right, so we only want to see to 9 for now. All right, and so 0 to 9 is actually the same in base 16. So we don't have to retype all that out. Copy and paste that over. Okay. Now in decimal, when we hit 9, we have no more characters. So we set it back to 0, we put a 1 in front of it. Okay. So we get 10. In hexadecimal, A is 10. All right. Now, in Excel and Google Docs anyway, it'll default numbers to the right and letters to the left, so you can kind of identify them. But here, it's messing up my example, so I fixed it. 11 to B. I'll fix those in a second. 12 is C. 13 is D. Do you notice the pattern here? All right. E and 15 is F. So we have 16 different characters in hexadecimal. Okay. Why do this and make it more complicated, right? That might be what you're asking. Well, think about inside of a computer. The more you know about how a computer works also makes everything make more sense. And it's something that I don't think gets taught. So I try to sprinkle this in some of the classes. So once we hit 16, we put a 0, just like we do in decimal, okay? And then we put a 1 in front of that. Okay, so 10, this isn't 10. This is 1 0 in hexadecimal, which means the 1 is 1, okay, times what? Over here, the 1 is times 10, so we know this is 10 things with 0 left over. Here's 10 things with a 1 left over, so it's 11. So we add the 10's place plus the 1's place, it's 11. So down here, we don't go 1, 10, 100. We actually go 0, 16ths, 16 times 16, 16 to the third, 16 to the fourth. Okay. And then we use the letters. So 11. So anyway, let's take a look at this. So hexadecimal calculator. Again, oops. If this is blowing your mind and you're worried about this, you won't be using this kind of knowledge directly in this class. It's just background information. So what do we have? We had CD or something. So CD is 205, okay? So we can calculate that real quick if I get to the right window. C and D. So CD together. So this is the 1's place, this is the 16th place. D represents 13, and C represents 12, right? So C in the 16th place is 16 times 12, okay? So that's 192 for the C, and then for the D, it's 1 times 13, and then we just add those together. There's 205. So that's how you convert from decimal, or I'm sorry, hexadecimal to decimal. Okay, you don't have to know how to do that for this class. I just want you to know what you're looking at when you're looking at these numbers here. So there's 1.5 million tools to get the color you want. There's a site, Adobe Colors, I think. So let's say you're like, I don't know what colors to use. I don't care. I don't want to think about it. You can use a site like this where people have put together template colors. Let's see if this is the right site. Under Explore, okay, you can see, well, I guess maybe they got rid of their, oh, maybe it's under Trends. They used to have just a list of game design, or if there's some for web. Because there are certain colors that work better on web, on a web page. I sound like an old person when I'm like, on web. Our class is on web. All right. Maybe I should do that on purpose. Graphic design. Okay, anyway, somewhere in here, you can find color themes. That's some game. Okay. One cool thing is you can throw a picture in here and it will create a theme based on that picture. So God knows what pictures I have on here. Let's see. Hopefully they're all benign. Don't really have. Okay, let's create a theme based on this chair. There we go. So you could use these colors together. This might be a good background color. This would be a good text color. This may be for borders or maybe a separate menu box or your header. There's a set of colors, and here's the codes. So I think if you just click it, it actually copies it for you, and then you can paste it in. All right. So, oops, not that one. I'm going to close that one so I don't keep clicking on it. Let's change this color to this color. Okay. Let's try using what I mentioned before. So let's use this as our text color. And then you can be the judge of whether you think it's good or not. Okay, so there's my text. And I want to use the lighter color as a background. Okay, you don't want your background to distract people. So pastel colors or lighter colors are really good. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's pretty good. I like that. So there's a tool for you to use colors if you want. Looks like you can choose some different kind of theme options too. All right. You can save these too if you create an account on Adobe. All right. I'm done talking about the color numbers. All right. Now you have mastery of using colors. And we have two these properties you're almost always going to use. So two, I hesitate to say most important, at least for the design part. Okay, and then there's more links on how to get colors and themes. Let's see. This is the Adobe one. Okay, so I'm not done yet. Let's use this. I think I can control click this. There we go. Nah, this must have replaced it. Okay. I guess I am done talking about that. All right, let's move on. All right. So, what does CSS stand for? Cascading style sheets. I believe style sheets were used in print to kind of, as a template, to know where to put what and how big to make it and yada yada. Okay. For physical print. So cascading style sheets are for, I guess you can call it digital print. I don't know. Digital screens, web pages. So all it is you're setting up rules to control how the page looks and to some degree how it reacts to things. Okay. And what is the cascading part? Refers to how the rules affect things on the page. So I told you your selectors can be remember the selectors here, they can be tag names. Okay, we're going to look at some other ways to refer to selectors and different things on the page. And that will identify for us, I'll talk more about the cascade, because right now it doesn't really, you don't have enough to kind of see. I can do an example once we have more. Okay, so these are the three types of CSS. All right, inline, embedded, and external. All right, and we'll start with, well, we already looked at external, so let's start with that. All right, external CSS affects this entire page, right? And why does it affect this page? If these two files, if I just created these two files, they would not interact. Okay, so to tell lag, I guess this is one downside to using everything web-based. This has live cloud storage, so every time you type a character, it saves. So I don't know how much resources that uses for the network, but okay. How does this connect to index.html? So if you look through here, you can probably see it. Why don't you look and see if you can figure out where here I'm connecting this style sheet while I talk about what you can do with external CSS. Okay, so in this case I have one web page, style sheet. Let's say I want to add another web page. Okay, we'll call this green.html. Okay, so I'm going to reiterate this too. I've selected green HTML here. I hit run. It's not loading this page. So when you run this, it will always find index.html first. So to be able to get to green.html easily, we are going to add a link. This is something we learned in chapter 2. So pause the video and see if you can write down the syntax for a link that will bring me to green.html. Okay. I need to play like a Jeopardy sound effect for this. Get that Jeopardy sound effect. I need a sound effect board. Let's liven this up. Okay, I was also going to record time codes for when I made mistakes for easier editing, but I am never going to remember to do that, so I'll try. Anyway, how are we going to connect these two? So we need a hyperlink. That's the anchor element. Okay, we need an A tag. Inside of that A tag, we need an href attribute. Okay, and that needs to be the path to the file. Since the file is within the same folder, I only have to put the name of the file. Okay, that is my opening tag for the link, but I'm not done yet. I need to put text for the link. So I put that between the opening and closing tags, and there we go. So now when I click that link, it brings me to green.html, which does not have anything on it. So I'm going to be lazy and just not put the boilerplate stuff because I just want to test something out. Though I will do this. Cannot hit that D. Okay. And then, just to reiterate this ability, inside of here we can right-click and do Format Document. And the indents are done automatically. Oh boy, indenting one thing without. Okay. So now if we look at green.html, these are my frustrated swirls that I do when it's loading. Okay. White background, black text. But we want to apply the CSS rules here on all the pages on our site so we have a consistent design. So how are we going to include those CSS rules on this page? Well, if you found it, line 7 here, the link element here is what attaches our style sheet. So at no point will I expect you to memorize how to type this out and what the values are, because it's as easy as just going to a previous assignment or just Googling how do I attach an external style sheet, and then you can just copy this. Notice it's in the head section, because this isn't going to show up. This link element isn't going to show up on the page. All it's going to do is apply the rules from the style sheet to the elements that are on the page. So we copied that, and this goes in the head section, so let's add that. I'm just adding that so that you guys can see that. I'm not adding the other elements. Chrome adds enough in to make the page work, as long as there's no egregious errors. So we just paste that in, and so it says, here's the file path, style.css, that's right here. REL, I believe that's relationship, so this is a link to a style sheet, and the type is a text file. All these are just text files. They just have different file extensions, but this is meant to be CSS. So now, when I go to green, it's going to copy that same CSS. All right, quick check on if anyone's panicking. Oh, also, as always, these are optional, and if you need to go for another class or go get something to eat or whatever you're doing, you can just come back and watch the rest of the video later, right? And I try to edit the videos down a little bit. Usually I just cut off the ends, so it doesn't really help that much, but all right. Now, I'm going to illustrate the power of external CSS. Let's say I had 1,000 pages on my website. It's not uncommon. 100, 1,000. Or if I want to add new ones, right? I can just attach the style sheet and they'll automatically look like the other pages. Let's say I'm doing this for a company and I have 1,000 pages. I build the website to be green like this, but they say, you know, we really want a red background. Am I going to want to have to go into every 1,000 files and change green to red? No. If I use an external style sheet, I just have to change the one rule for background color on body. And let's choose an appropriate red color here. So remember, you want a lighter color for your background. Let's go red. Kind of a lighter color. All right. Since I changed it in that style sheet, every page that is linked to this style sheet is now changed. So in one place, I can change one value and it'll affect the entire website. So that is why you want to use external CSS, is basically building the look of your website. All right, so external CSS has an effect on multiple pages. You can use it for a single page. There are other reasons to use it. For the people in the programming classes, if I ever talk about GitHub, separating your code into separate files makes it a lot easier for people to work on it collaboratively using version control software like Git over GitHub. If we have time, I've been wanting to do a final project in this class where I have you guys build a website. GitHub has a free hosting. What am I doing now? We're going to look at the next type of CSS, embedded styles. Okay. So to use external styles, this tells you what to do. You have to create the file and then add the link element to the pages you want it to affect. For embedded, you have to just put the CSS code directly in the head section. Okay, you create a style element and you can list CSS code in there, and it will apply to one entire page. Okay, and I can demonstrate the cascade effect of CSS. So let's go back to our web page. Let's use index so we don't have to keep clicking on the link. So in our head section, we will add a style element, open, close tags, and then right in between, we can put CSS code. So what happens when the browser reads this file? When it gets down to the style opening tag, it says, okay, from now on, I'm only looking for CSS code. So do not put anything but CSS rules in here, or else it'll break. Okay, and then it's also looking for the closing style tag, and then it will go back to processing the HTML. So in here, on the index page, where did my paragraph go? Oh, I'm not on the index page. Okay. On this index page, I want to add a rule for H1. So I just use H1 as a selector. I use the element or the tag name. So let's change the color to white because we'll see a pretty big difference there. Okay. So that affected the body here. If we go to this page, it did not affect that here. Now, on index.html, we are using two types of CSS, external and embedded. So if we go down to the end, which I don't know why they threw this at the end, it's kind of annoying, we can see what the cascade is. Okay? So, hopefully you recognize some of these. We talked about external and embedded. When a web page loads in your browser, if there is no CSS attached, it's going to use whatever the browser uses by default. That's why all of our pages had a white background and black text, because that's just the default values in that browser. Okay? When we applied external styles, that overwrote the defaults in the browser. Okay, but the things we didn't overwrite still fall back in the browser. So external styles, any properties changed will overwrite the defaults. Okay? And that same pattern follows down through the cascade. So if we include embedded, just like we did on our index page here, we still have style.css attached to this. So the way this runs is it'll check for external CSS. It says the text color is green, or whatever this dark green color is. It'll change all the text on the page to match that color. Okay, we'll talk about later why the link is different. Okay, so, but this isn't green. That's because after it's done doing the external CSS, it comes back and checks for embedded CSS. And that rule is changing H1s to white, overriding the external rule. Okay, so all of these get run one at a time, change everything to the defaults, overwrite any properties changed here, overwrite any properties changed here, etc., etc. That is what the cascade is. All right. And when we start looking at other tags, you'll see there within these, there's an even more complicated cascade. But when we're just using tag rules, it doesn't make that big of a difference. Okay, so you know what? This is the one I use. I'm going to move this up to right after. Now this is watch James edit his course material of the class. Okay, where are we talking about the types? Right here. I'm going to put this right after. It makes way more sense there. These are slides from the textbook, but I edit them and try to remove extraneous information. If I just skip over things, it's usually because that's just background information that if you want to look at it, you can, but I probably won't test you on it. Anything that I'm going to test you on for a test is going to be what I talk about, all right? And I guess you have a record of what I said, so if you want to pour through the hours of footage for this class and find where I didn't mention something on a test, I will give you those points back. All right. I hate tests in classes where they're not specific about what's going to be on the test. Because when they do that, they're wasting a lot of your time where you have to absorb, you have to cram, yada, yada. I don't want people to have to do that. I'm going to try to remove as many barriers as I can for you to learn. All right. So inline CSS is the last type. All right. It actually goes in the body. All right, so that's tricky. And the way you use it is you just have to include a style attribute on any opening tag, and you can specifically change that element's properties. Okay, the syntax is slightly different. All right, I don't know why these are floating over the code. This doesn't need to be in there. All right. So here, what is this? This is code for the H1 element. You have the opening H1 tag. What is the opening H1 tag? Well, it's the name of H1, and we also have, after the space, the style attribute. Okay, so it's just an attribute like any other attribute that we learned in chapter 2. Equal sign, double quotes, and then in the value of the attribute, we use the CSS property and the CSS value, and that will change this one element to whatever properties you want to change. And you can change multiple properties in here too. So on index, we have an H1. Let's put another one, and we'll make it black. So if you have this, also when you're messing with colors on a computer, you're actually using not the normal color wheel where, red and blue, make purple, and blue and yellow make green. We're actually using the colors of the spectrum. Okay, so what that means is this is 0, red light, green light, and blue light. Okay, if you have no light, what color is that going to be? Black. Okay, if you have all the light, white light is what happens when you have every color of light combined, right? So, if you're looking at something black, it's going to absorb a lot more light, and that's why when you wear dark colored clothes in the sun, you get hot a lot faster. All right, so when you're outside, wear light colors. Okay, anyway, you'll notice we have the inline rule here. So let's talk about the cascade one last time, and then we don't have to worry about it again until we code multiple things. So first, the defaults are applied, changing everything to black and white. Then the external is applied, changing all the text and body to this dark green. Okay, so we can see that on high, because no other rule affects this paragraph. Okay, then we go back and we look for embedded CSS. All right, so it finds the style tag. Now this is saying on this page, change all H1s to white. So it changes both of these H1s to white. Okay, and then we look for inline. Okay, here this one is changing this H1 to black, the text color. All right, so you can see the full cascade in motion. If we didn't have this H1, both of these would be, or I'm sorry, if we didn't have this inline, these would both be white. Okay, and if we get rid of the embedded, what color will they be? Green, right? And if we get rid of the CSS, okay, I'm not actually going to get rid of it. I'm just going to hide it from the browser. Okay. So this changes the path required to get to styles.css, so it won't be able to find it. Computer sounds like a jet engine. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that. Okay. Had to reload. Okay, anyway, we got rid of the ability for this to find the external style sheet, so now it's just using the browser defaults. So, bonus, if you want to, there are times when you want to separate your files into different folders, okay? So, what if I do want to use this in the secrets folder? All I have to do is change the file path here. Make this easier to see. Okay, so if we put style.css in here, we're saying in the same folder as the file, you should find style.css. Well, it's not in that folder. It's in the secrets folder. Okay, and then you put a slash. So you list all the folders down to wherever you need to go, and then that should fix that. You can have folders inside of folders. Okay. So there we go. So now we have a secrets folder. Inside of that, we have a CSS folder. And inside of that, I'm going to put that. So that'll break this. Okay. How do we fix it? So we're in the secrets folder, and then go to the CSS folder, and then you'll find style. So remember, this href is a path, but if the files are in the same folder, you just have to use the file name. It's still a path, I just want to make sure you know, you don't just put the name of whatever file you want to use. You have to tell the computer how to get to it. All right, and that should fix that. Okay. What else? Okay, covered that. Some more properties. Font weight, font style, font size, and font family. So I think you can look in the book for examples of these, but I feel like it's much faster, and you can copy and paste if you use the internet here. Look up a nice website. So let's look at font weight CSS. Okay. Here's some examples. You can use font weight normal, bold, or 900. All right. What's cool about this site too is you don't really have to copy and paste it to test it. If you have to try it, it puts this little thing here so you can test the code. So what kind of CSS are they using here? What is this CSS called? This is embedded because it's a style element in the head section. This will only affect this page. Why do you think they're using embedded CSS in this example? There's a good reason. Okay, it doesn't have to do with the design of the page or the efficiency. It has to do with you can see the CSS and the HTML on the same page this way, and embedded is a lot easier to read than inline. Okay. So you can see some examples of this. They're using some other types of selectors here that we'll look at here in a bit. Okay, so let's do one more. Font family is one of the most annoying ones. Fonts in the browser are kind of annoying. If you use any font that's kind of like special or you found somewhere, no one else is going to have that. So you have to either let them download it, and they have to install it. It's a whole process. So let's check out. So this site has a lot of these. Font family. So here we've got font family property, and then the values are the names of the different types of font that you want to use. A few rules about CSS properties. Property values, anyway. Properties always have to be one contiguous word or set of characters. You can't have spaces in there. It breaks. Come on. All right. So if I put a space there. Here. Because I think that's using the default anyway. So it breaks if you don't make it one contiguous set of characters. Okay. Okay. Also, and this may only be for font family. I can't think of any more off the top of my head. Some of the values are going to have spaces. Now, the interpreter that will read this code uses spaces to separate certain things. All right. So, Times New Roman is one type of font, and since it has spaces, we have to put double quotes around that value, okay, so that it knows these spaces are part of the name. And why are there 3 fonts listed? Okay. So here it says that this one's using Arial. Let me rerun it so you can see that. So that one's different. And this one's using Times New Roman, so these two have different fonts. But why is this one using Times New Roman? this one using Arial, and these other ones aren't being used. So think about that for a second. Why would we list more fonts as values if it's only going to use the first one? Okay, think about what I said earlier about using like specialty fonts for your web page. Okay, not every browser has every text type or font family. Or font, I guess we can just call it font, right? Not every browser has every one. So when we separate these different fonts with commas, what we're saying is use Times New Roman. If you can't find that, use one called Times. If you can't use that, use serif. Okay? So we kind of go, in this case, we kind of go for like a more specific type of font to just the most generic font possible, a serif font versus a sans serif font. Okay? And we can see Arial here is a sans serif font. Times New Roman is a serif font. Once you look at those, and if you've had a Microsoft Word class, you may know what these mean. It's pretty important because in different places you're going to want to use different types of font in your web design. Okay, so take a look. What do you notice that's different? Okay, Times New Roman is a serif font. It has all the little extra flourishes. Arial is a sans serif font. It is just lines. There is no fancy curls or anything on that. All right, that's what that is. So you can try out these other properties. If these show up in the PowerPoint, that means you're going to have to use them in the exercises. And if you do get stuck on the exercises, remember, every exercise is just pulling something directly from the book. So you can just go back to that section and look at the example they have. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about font size, because it also has a little bit of a complicated value. If you've taken a science class from the year 2000 to now, maybe even earlier, you may have been, or even a math class, I guess, where the teacher takes off points because you didn't label your answer. So, you know, you're calculating out how much interest will I get in a year if I have this interest rate and this much money. Okay. And I come up with 700, and I put that down as my answer. Well, 700 what? 700 cents, 700 nickels, $700. You have to be specific on your labels. Okay. Now, if I was talking to a person and I said I got 700 from the bank, they're going to assume dollars, right? Well, computers aren't that smart. It is not going to make an assumption for you. You need to label your values for size, okay? And you have a lot of options. You can just use the text names, all right? And you can see on here what the difference is there between them. You can use EM, which is very similar to percent. Notice half an EM is 50%, 2 EM is 200%. So, and these are equal. You can go by pixels, all right? And you can Google what a pixel is. You can use points, and a point is an actual real-world measurement. So, real-world measurements don't really translate well to digital content because there are so many different screen sizes and resolutions. It just doesn't make sense. Okay. Here's your random fact of the day. I want pint. There we go. So here's your point measurement. 1 point is this many inches, all right? And I wonder if it's super even in metric. Let's see if we can do centimeters. Wow, what a great calculator. Why even give options? All right, sure, cookies. There we go. Oh, no. Anyway, I never use that one. But I do know that the PT is, I looked it up because I was curious why this is here. And you can just use percentage. The thing with percentage and EM is that it'll go off the base size. All right. And where pixels and point and text values, I think, are more hard set.